Thanks very much, Kathy. I hope that wasn't part of the 5 minutes.
Nope.
I'm from the East Coast, and when you tell me I've got a little time, it just means I'm going to speak faster, so hold on to your seats. First of all, public policy. There is a definition, and to go back, and there's nothing dustier than the Oxford English Dictionary. Public policy does appear there. Two things that are important. One is that public policy actually has a definition in law, so it really does have a grounding, and that's important for all of us to remember, including our legislators, perhaps especially our legislators. And also, really important, I think, for this group and for us all to remember is that public policy does fundamentally have to do with the public good. And that's something that we all have to keep reminding ourselves, reminding each other, reminding our leaders in all sectors. And increasingly in our Western democracies, just saying that it's about the public good isn't enough. You have to be able to define and measure and understand what public good you're talking about. And increasingly, there is a greater public engagement not just from stakeholding groups, but from the wider public in the definition, the development, and the enaction of public policy. And we see that as a really important and distinctive trend, and one that we're encouraging both here in Ontario and across Canada. There are a number of different ways to think of public policy. You can think of it in terms of its orientation: economic policy, social policy, defense policy. There are 6 areas here that I've put up on the slide that I think are important, that I keep coming back to, and ones that you should be thinking about as you're pursuing your own policies. Distributive policies are about thinking about program services for particular parts of our societies. Redistributive are taking some of the revenues and the resources we have and obviously redistributing those. And tax policy is the best example of redistributive policy in our country. Constituent policy is about delivering something for a very specific group, whether that is seniors or children, and having a very clear policy around those areas. Conflict is where you're trying to balance off different interests. A great case in point right now is the environment and energy, and how do we balance off those two things in our country. Bargaining policy is about going to government and asking them to do something for you or for a particular group. The Registered Disability Savings Plan is a great case where Canada has actually been really innovative in developing a new policy in that interest. Regulatory is when you're going to government and asking them to do less or to do things differently. And the greatest case in point right now for all of us would be the work that the CRA is doing in terms of its overview of charities in Canada. So it's important to think about what kind of a policy you are pursuing, what kind of a policy are you seeking, and how are you doing that. The theory of public policy making is this. It's very, very straightforward, very staid, and it really starts, as you're looking at the screen on the upper left-hand side, around agenda setting. That agendas are set kind of through discussion. They may be through political parties and engagement with groups. It may be through groups like the ONN and how things are set. Then it goes into policy formulation within government, where they hear from different groups and they come up with something that they think is worthwhile. A decision is made on that. The policy is developed and then implemented. And then there's constant monitoring and evaluation about whether that policy is doing what it set for it. That's the theory. The actual reality of policy making is more so like this, where there are so many different groups involved at different parts of the process, and the real necessity is to engage all of those groups all of the time. So as you're thinking about where you're situated in your own particular area and through the ONN, think about the groups that are fellow travelers. Think about the groups that have different views than you do. Think about who you're trying to influence and who you can get on board with you to influence those decision makers that ultimately will make that decision. It is ultimately about decision making, but the process by which those decisions are taken is very intricate, often painstaking, sometimes very, very long. So my final reminder to you is to always watch your ask. Be very, very clear what you're seeking about. Be very, very consistent in how you're saying it. Be very, very persistent in seeking its resolution. Everybody is thinking now about impact. And what is the greater impact in all that we do? Policy is part of that. But certainly the policy process and the development and implementation of policy is also part of that. So it's really important, again, for you to find those fellow travelers, to be seeking to get them on board with what you're doing, to network with those outside who are helpful in making influence, media, community leaders, others that have an interest in different sectors and what you are seeking to do. And ultimately, all of that will achieve in getting decision makers to better understand and better respond to what you're seeking to do in your networks and within your organizations. Thanks very much.